Hello, everyone. We're gonna go ahead and start. I'm sure, like, if everyone can hear me, then wave your hands. Woo. All right, cool. And please feel free to go ahead and use the chat button to ask questions throughout, and Erin will ask the questions. So it's funny, as all things have a little bit of technical difficulty. I had practice with my phone and it was beautifully framing everything, and now it's not working anymore. So if for some reason I am like filming the ceiling or the floor, my feet, then just let me know. Like, let Erin know. Be like, hey, you can only see like these chords. And I'm not really sure, like, you guys can hang out for an hour, not hang out for an hour. I'll just kind of start talking about the work right now. And I'm assuming more people will join. And if they, cool, thanks, Gina. If other people join, you can kind of give me the heads up and be like, hey, review everything. So this first piece is, and I'll kind of step back, give you good, and this is my basement, by the way. This is sort of my cheating almost studio space, but it works. My art works good in creepy basements, so it all kind of worked out well. And this is our dog, Henry. He's really excited about tonight, obviously, as you can see. I think he's sleeping. But this first piece, and I'll show you guys with and without lights, is a piece that I've been working on for quite some time. And it's me figuring out how to create an interface that will have people be able to hold each other's heartbeats. And this is the little, this green means go is the sensor right here. And let's see if we can do this. I will, and this is just them. They have like a resting movement because it felt weird and wrong to not have them moving all the time. So I wanted to have them like have a sleeping movement, and then I will see if this works. It sometimes gets performance anxiety. Oh, there it goes. So now it is beating to my heartbeat. And Erin, do you want to come over here and demonstrate how, like, yeah, you do. Well, you can come over, put your hand on the frame.
So mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my God, I forget you're like you're a giant.
Your size.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's something that I always forget. I make art that is my size instead of everybody else's size. And now I'll take my finger away so they go back to their resting. Are you going to? Yeah, sure. Now it's going to have performance anxiety. Oh, there it goes. The heartbeat is actually a little bit more chill than mine. They also kind of have like their own little personality. Sorry, this is so weird, even though it's a good idea to like have people muted on these meetings. It's very weird not to like be in the same room as people and see their expressions or know what's happening. I kind of feel like I'm just talking to Erin in a really formal way, so it's kind of freaking me out. And then there's like some of the guts of it. This is where all of the air flows, and it actually is controlled by a pump. And the fun fact is it's actually controlled by a breast pump that then has, is connected. Oh, Can you read that question?
What are they sitting in?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So during the time that I've been working on this, I've had them in many different forms. And what they are now in, the little silicone finger pulsating things, is they are actual organ transplant pods that were once used to transport heart and lungs. I took them apart. They actually used to have, they used to have a mechanism that was attached to this area right here. So it had like a giant system, which helped create a fake circulatory system that would keep the heart and lungs beating and more viable for a longer period of time. It increased the viability of transplant organs to around 24 hours, which usually it's about 6. So that also assisted in international heart transplants, because you could actually get them to another place.
So we have a question.
Yeah.
John mentioned that he never realized how much they looked like a child's crib, which makes me think of how you had them displayed before.
Yes.
So do you want to kind of speak about why they're in these pods?
Yeah, I mean, before they were in neonatal care cradles, they were actually for infants. And I kind of like the idea of them having some sort of container that nurtures them and takes care of them. And the geek in me can't stop. Anytime I see something that has like a little hatch kind of that can shut on something, I just think of Superman and like the pod that he was sent to Earth in. So, and I'm like, oh, this is like their safety pod that they can be protected in if they need to escape, I guess, which you never know, they might. And eventually I would love to be able to have these go through the internet so that they could be transported. Well, there's another question. Could you? It's sorry, and I can almost see the questions, but they vanish on me.
So the question of if they can grow in size or not.
Oh, God, that would be awesome if they could. But no, they just have like the pulsation rate. They don't really inflate much more than what you're seeing right there. And it's interesting, and another piece that I did, I'm gonna speed this guy up for a second, because it just beats a little bit stronger, but they never really changed that much in size. And one thing that I found out in some of the different permutations of this piece is if you stretch silicone too thin and then put it under a huge amount of pressure and stress, it starts to split apart. So the larger, like I stretched a sheath to kind of get it to be larger, the more quickly that it disintegrated, more or less. And this is like a good size for them to stay put together. So I'll show you, normally they have, let's see if mood lighting works. It can kind of be a little, actually, Erin, would you hold this? So, yeah. Just so they don't have to see me, like.
Fumble around.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that looks great.
Does it look okay?
Yeah.
We can kind of do like an either or.
Yeah, if they had the first setting, you could actually see everything.
Oh, you could?
Yeah. This is.
I just like the clinical light setting better.
Yeah, I think in person the second looks much better, but.
This guy?
Yeah. Looks not quite as blown out.
The highly technical. And see, this is what it looks like when it's like a normal
size hand.
Yeah. And then let's see. it seems to like, I don't know why I do. This is like comforting to me when I'm nervous. I just keep on making them beat faster. So to really, you can come around the other way. Micromanaging. No.
So other than that, so other than the size of each individual ones, can the kind of groupings themselves grow in size?
Oh yes, they could. There would require either for me to eventually find a stronger pump, or just use more of the pumps. Because right now, in each of these containers, there is 59. So there could probably be 60 of these tips. And honestly, that's kind of reaching its maximum. What?
Somebody reaching at the screen.
Oh.
Caught me off guard. Just saw a hand.
Like you just flinched. I was like, what's going on?
It's a horror show.
And 60, I think, per pump is kind of at its maximum, and it starts to affect like how visibly it can pulsate. It just takes away a little bit of power. But that is something that I do want to do, is start seeing ways in which I can make them a little bit more of a conglomeration. And
then what ways do you see this kind of permutations and so forth virtually? How do you see that playing out?
The whole idea would be that you would be able to send the physical interface to somebody any place, like across the street or around the world, and then the heartbeat, the signal, the data of your heartbeat would then have a base like within the internet that would then send that data to connect to the physical interface someplace else. So it wouldn't have to be hardwired, so to speak, but so that is eventually what I like, and that's kind of why I also like this form, because it feels like it can also become a carrying case, and it is somewhat transportable.
Does the work have any relationship with artificial intelligence or cyborg?
Or cyborg?
Or cyborg. Not plural cyborg. Just the one.
I mean, for me, I feel like they're artificial intelligence, but I don't necessarily know if that's where I'm going, though I have been heavily influenced my entire life with my intense obsession with robots and AI. Two of my favorite well, my all-time favorite film is Blade Runner. So my lifelong dream is to actually be a replicant, and just not know it yet. So if anybody knows if I am a replicant, then please tell me as soon as possible. But like a link to AI and all of the idea of data, it's more about having like a physical part of you be translated into a message more than it is artificial intelligence. Maybe I call it physical intelligence.
Well, do you want to speak to how these connect people and this notion of connection?
Sure. I mean, since this is the first time anyone has actually seen this model, and obviously no one but me and Aaron are interacting with it.
And Henry.
Oh, and Henry. Though Henry can only like cuddle with it. His paw won't actually fit in the sensors. Thank you to Carolyn Payne for asking that question yesterday as one of the task questions. Henry's paw does not fit into the sensor. But so one of the permutations was that it was at the Weisman Museum, and I actually had office hours where I would go and interact with people that could hold it. And at that point, it was a Fitbit, so people had to put it on their wrist. But it was still these pulsating guys. You could actually pick them up and hold them, like in that, but it was a much smaller grouping of them. And one of the things that I found is it was more difficult to keep all of them pumping if people could like kind of twist them up and tie them into knots. So I'm trying this as like an easier way for you to be able to feel the pulsation and also not have to juggle putting something on your wrist. This time all you have to do is put your finger in the hole and then it works and you send your heartbeat.
If you could remote interface with anybody in the world, who would it be?
Anybody in the
Yes.
Is this a dating game?
That's what I'm just like. It seems like we're in the bar games, but that's not my question.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, the only word that came to my mind was Satan.
Satan.
Yeah.
I don't know. But is that would he count? Is he here?
I don't know. We never know.
Oh. You know what's really weird is Tom Waits just popped into my mind. I have no idea why. I'm not sure if he would be the first person that I would want to talk to, but I feel like he would have a lot to say about this.
I think it's the interface with the machine, not necessarily talk about it.
Yeah.
Like whose heartbeat would you want to hold in your hand?
Oh, got it. Oh, this is so hard. I really don't know. You?
Great answer. That's adorable.
Yeah. It would be you.
Yes.
I can also show you guys the angle for that is best once again on camera. Okay. Micromanaging.
No, that's fine. The questions might be a bit delayed though.
Oh yeah. Sometimes you can see them on the screen, but it's like a fast.
Hey, you know what? You want to hold this for a second?
Sure.
And give a tour, and I can put the screen
over there. Oh, got it. Okay. This is totally professional. So this is strangely not exactly how it would be showing, and it would also be full of algae instead of water. It's like I know I'm doing like zoom in and zoom out. This is great.
Like a cartoon character,
yeah.
So a sexy thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
So now it's just gonna be all the noise. The last time. None of the noise. So this is I'm not sure how many of you actually saw the piece that was at MIA, but I had this place that said cyanobacteria, which essentially there will be cyanobacteria in the bags. Can you even hear me?
You can. I'm sorry. It's just our landlord next door loves what we did with the basement.
Oh.
Thanks, Brandon.
Yeah. Thanks, Brandon. And much like the piece at MIA, I have a sensor inside this microphone stand that actually evaluates the CO2 levels within your breath. And then you, of course, this is just water and that cyanobacteria, but you can still make it hot. All the oh. Oh. This is what we Henry be on camera.
Well, if we had a smaller stand, he could breathe into it.
Yeah, he could. I wish I could hold him up. I think,
Oh,
yeah. Sorry. Because I'm an old lady and have my contacts on right now, which also means I don't have my bifocals. Like I can't actually read the screen to know what the questions are.
so we had somebody that remembered your superhero kids from way back when. Is there any reference or thought between those?
Ooh, that is a good blast from the past there. They were startup supervillain kits. I mean, there's definitely the containers that these supervillain kits were in actually do look very similar to these clear pods, which is more a question of how people were designing the organ transplant pods in general. Oh yeah, yeah. No, yep. Sorry, we're turning off the crazy pubs. But yeah, I think I just like clear plastic modules, to be honest with you. Not so much that it was any knowing. Here, can you just,
Yep,
I feel really weird, like.
No, sure. I got this.
Talking to my phone. But yeah, there was no necessarily thoughtful investigation of what plastic containers mean. I just kind of like the aesthetic and the fact that you can see different layers all at once. Yeah. This is what I do. Can you still, oh, you can see it.
Yep.
Is that bad light or good light?
There you go. So in both the pieces you have here, you have this kind of interactivity, which seems to be kind of a newer direction or recent direction in your work. How do you see the viewer, or how are you interested in the viewer, deciding what happens with the piece?
Well, I think, I'm sorry, could you maybe?
So both the pieces we're looking at here are reactive,
yes.
Interactive. So how is that different from the work that you did before this? And what is your interest in having the work react to people around it?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I think it was a nervous delayed response. So I've always sort of imagined everything I do in a cinematic way. And so I see it as scenes playing out regardless. So I think having it become something that was interactive was an organic progression for me for what I always saw anyway. Like I always saw the pieces moving and being a part of a larger environment. And then I kind of took a step to make that happen so that people could actually interact with them, and it could become a real aspect of their lives that they could touch and hold and have an effect on. Because I do think when people can affect something, it makes them more thoughtful, it gives them agency, it is something that allows them to connect on a deeper level, and create empathy, so to speak. And even though these aren't alive, they become a manifestation of a living connection. And that's really important. And I can't think of another word, but it's at the heart of what I do.
The core.
Yes, thank you.
It's core strength.
Yes. The core of what I do. So yeah, And I think it's a way to connect people to themselves too. The interactions that I was lucky enough to have when I was at the Weisman were a lot of people really amazed at seeing their heartbeat. I mean, even if it is in this removed aspect. And there was a lot of questions about my heartbeat doesn't feel like this or sound like this. Like, how is it so strong and how can you feel it so intensely? Well, your heartbeat is actually that powerful. One of the things that I did at the University School of Medicine was when I was an artist in resident there, is I held and this pig was just under anesthesia, so it was sleeping and its chest was cracked open, and I held the pig heart in my hand, which was really intense on many different levels, but the power of that beating heart and feeling it, just feeling the strength of something fighting to not fight. Well, it kind of actually did feel like fighting to stay alive. Just this intense effort and strength that was surrounding the heartbeat. And that's sort of the center of our existence, not our mental existence, but our physical existence.
So you talk about this notion of this kind of comforting connection. I guess I always remember that story you told based on like the complex nature of how cells have to be together or they pass.
Yeah.
Do you want to kind of speak to that?
Sure. It was the twofold of trying to figure out how to show that we all need to be connected to stay alive. The other lab that I was in was the system regeneration lab. I feel kind of like I'm giving a talk to these guys at this point. At least they won't judge me. And a part of this experience, the residency, was just kind of hanging out with lab members all day long. And usually a lot of me asking extremely silly questions. And one of them happened to be, why do you need to create why are all the cultures colonies? Like, why is it never experiments on a single cell? Which at the time, I'm like, duh, that seems a ridiculously dumb question. But her answer was much more interesting because she thought of science. She was like, well, it's interesting. If we don't cultivate the cells in colonies, what happens is the cells, once they are disconnected from the cellular matrix, no longer hear signals from other cells and they shut down. And my response was, oh my God, you're telling me the building blocks of living things can die of loneliness. And she thought that was funny, but did admit that that was somewhat true. And I thought that was a very powerful motivation to try to create connections with things.
So do you interact with these pieces on a daily basis? You mentioned they aren't exactly alive, but I'm curious on how you interact or live around them.
Well, at this point, I do actually interact with them on a regular basis. Yeah, I think eventually I'm going to pack them up and get them ready to go to their next exhibition. Hopefully, one was permanently canceled. Hopefully one in September will come through. They were kind of nice though. It's kind of like having little friends.
So this kind of meshes into a comment from somebody who's saying that they're comforting conversations between the work and the people. But can you speak to the reactions people had of having the pieces in the Weisman? I mean, I'm thinking of the brief time I sat, and some people were really enthralled and some people were really not into it. So how have people been kind of reacting to the aspect of holding a heartbeat? because it is a powerful connection.
It is. I mean, some people were honestly disturbed, and I don't even know if it was necessarily the idea that they were holding their heartbeat or somebody else's. I think the materials can have an effect on that. I mean, somebody actually described these as being very similar to holding a baby finger. Hopefully baby finger does not pulsate like that, but it is soft. It kind of does feel like skin. So there is an aspect of that that can be unsettling. And honestly, they do move in a somewhat troubling way. But the people that had a good reaction to it thought it was really beautiful. And one thing that I thought was really interesting was people started comparing their hearts, which I don't think it has the sensitivity to actually be able to pick that up. But I love the fact that they just automatically were like, oh, your heartbeat is much stronger than mine, which I'm thinking I don't even think that's data that it's collecting. But I love that that is what people thought was going on. And that is the beauty of also introducing people to the equation, is everyone has their own ideas and their own thoughts and sees things that are happening.
So why did you pick the breadth in the algae piece? So what was the idea that you interacted it with through your breath?
And now, sometimes when I say things out loud, I realize I'm actually super cheesy, but I like the idea of breathing life into something, and that it was the act of you giving CO2 to the cyanobacteria, which actually uses it as a way of staying alive, and in turn, it releases oxygen that we need. So I like the idea that there was this exchange taking place. So you gave something to the cyanobacteria, and the cyanobacteria gives something back to you. But it's also very intimate, and I like the idea of always having the connections having an intimate nature to them.
Yeah, it becomes truly interactive rather than reactive. The idea that the piece gives back to you. Mm-hmm. So I kind of like that in both pieces. So what's next?
Well, this is how all of my ideas begin, and I don't know if this is how it will end, but right now I want to create a brain cloud, and I am going to be hopefully starting to work with a neurologist. He doesn't know this is really happening yet. It was an idea that we just tripped upon when we were talking about maybe creating a piece together. But kind of going off the idea of empathy and ways in which you can start to understand how you are sorry, you're like one another and different. I want to create an interface in which somehow when areas of the brain are excited or engaged or frightened, that is translated into a physical interface so that people can actually, on a very rudimentary level, read each other's thoughts, but it would be more emotion-based because we can't actually read each other's minds. Or if I do come up with that, then we're set for life, baby.
Yes. Yes. Then we can make another horrible movie.
Yeah. And those super friendly kids will be around.
Yeah, that's so good. So outside of neurology, Are there any other scientists that you'd love to work with?
Material chemistry has always been fascinating to me. I don't really have a particular scientist in mind, but that always, I feel like, has a lot of promise and intrigue to me, just because much of what I do is material based, insofar as that I definitely have a type, so to speak.
So what would that type be?
I love sort of fleshy, translucent, malleable material. On the flip side, I also like shiny things.
There we go. Get rid of the lens flare.
Okay. But I'd also like to be introduced to other things that are out there and just get inspired by that, see what possibilities are. Because I think there's a lot of miraculous things being developed in materials that we can't even really imagine yet.
Oh, I compliment that Ada Hesse would like to work.
My grand art crush, other than
who's not art crush? Yeah.
yeah, other than Louise Bourgeois, but yeah.
So how do you go about finding the objects that you use for your pieces?
Twofold. I imagine what I want, and then I try to find something that is the closest proximity to it. I don't really know how. I don't know if this is a weird underlining reflection on sort of the excesses of consumerism, for the simple fact that usually I can imagine something and I will be able to find something that I can adapt fairly easily. Now, I alter things, of course, do a little bit of bending to my will, but you can definitely find things around, and I like to find things that kind of, if they don't meet the concepts completely on the nose, I like things to amuse me conceptually, even if I'm the only one who knows what they are, such as the components other than fasteners and the things that are sort of holding the structure together are all things used at a dairy farm. So they're part of milking machines. And I kind of like the fact that this could definitely have the aesthetic of some sort of milking mechanism as
well. So where else, you mentioned kind of dairy equipment, where else do you go looking? Like where are your object haunts?
There's this amazing hospital liquidation surplus place in Big Lake that I go to every once in a while and find a lot of really weird stuff. And this is one of the beauties of being able to play the I'm an artist card, which is better than saying I'm a serial killer and I'm sorry that I want things that are kind of disturbing. So they are always amused at the things that I pick out and usually give them to me for a pretty good price, simply because I'm not actually using them as medical equipment.
So outside of an art context, do you see like any sort of avenue for exploration for your work? And they gave, say, medical, fashion, therapeutic, etc.
I mean, I always think of, this is gonna sound strange, but I actually always think of art being, and I hate saying it in that way, art being, I think that when ideas are generated, that they're sort of put forth into the world, that it would be beautiful if people would approach me or start a conversation of where an idea could go. I don't necessarily have, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I don't necessarily have any limitations of where I would like to see things go. I mean, I've worked with people in a lot of different fields. I always think I would want to keep control over what I do. So there's always that aspect of learning to give over a little bit of myself if eventually these pieces could help in some sort of medical or therapeutic way.
Can you speak to the ideas of the multiple in your work? What does it mean to be replicatable? Let's see, how does the work change when you have 100 versus 5? So, you know, why this notion of numbers in your work?
I find multiples really comforting. I don't know if I find them comfortable to make, but I do like the idea of something of a group becoming a larger whole. I think that I do, in my own special way, see, it's gonna sound insane, that I kind of I feel like I'm building a community for these things, and they're not so lonely. So they have something around them to give them comfort, and one would be fine. I just think it's way more fun to be able to like put your hands in this this way. Sorry, and I am manhandling them now.
Do you journal and read to inspire or document your work?
I have never had a journal. I definitely read. I watch a lot. I'm not gonna lie, I watch a lot of films. a lot. And document, I'm not sure what is the context there.
To inspire you or document your work.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I think I see the whole like drawing sketches to document the work. Which very rarely I do. Sometimes I use Google SketchUps just for architectural concerns so that I can problem solve engineering. But most of the time I don't really do a lot of sketches. I like to take photographs of things to have like sort of an image journal to look back on sometimes, but that's about as close as I get to journaling.
So you started this conversation with the idea that your artwork looks good in weird places, and you gravitate towards like odd places in space. Mm-hmm. So why? Like, what's the attraction to non-empty spaces, and how do your objects kind of fill those spaces?
That's a good question, and I'm not ever really sure the answer to. But I feel like sometimes they look like they belong in a space, and other times they look like they don't. It's almost like scouting a location for a film. There's something that just feels right. Sorry, Henry's like cozying up to all the chords right now. So some locations feel right to me and others not so much, but I have to adapt them. But space is really important, and sometimes I will change them. Dramatic lighting, always a huge thing. I mean, normally, I don't know, like how, well, yeah, they're just like glowing orbs, but in a space, they would be dependent only upon the light that's attached to the piece. Can you see? Okay.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, why? I mean, I obviously know your penchant and love for very dramatic lighting. You know, is it just something you're attracted to, or do you see it playing out in a different way?
I think that for me, oh, turn it back on. I think for me, the lighting feels, it helps people be alone with something in a room. Like it's just you and it, so to speak, or you and whoever is close within the lighting spotlight, so to speak. So it kind of creates its own intimate space that doesn't really depend upon things in the peripheral, so to speak.
Where are all your tools?
Some of them currently are in the garage, and I do have another studio space that actually that is a working space that has most of my tools. So this is kind of like the clean display space.
Do you see the lighting element kind of as a reference to all your cinematic influences?
Yes, and I definitely think so. I mean, that's such an important aspect of creating mood and honestly manipulating people's feelings, making it feel comfortable, uncomfortable. There's just such a lot of emotional manipulation you can accomplish with subtle changes in light that, yes, that is something that is very important to me that I stole from the cinematic world.
So if space is so, as I've seen you work, you definitely respond to space quite well. Is there spaces that you have seen and wanted to put your work in that you haven't been able to yet?
And I think I've always thought about it, but something really Baroque, like a cathedral or something that has classical architecture, something opposite of what I would normally think of. And I don't mean Victorian, I mean like
Actual Baroque.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Fine.
Just because I've never seen what my work would look like, I'm just curious. I'm curious how I would adapt it to that environment. I'm curious as to how it would affect its context. Mm-hmm. Just to see if it would become more otherworldly or just absurd. Because it's not really a setting that one would think of when you look at something like this. So I've always wanted the opportunity to see how context really could manipulate people's perception beyond the work, the room that it is contained there within. And taking something that has so much art already in the architecture, it would be interesting to see how those two things played with one another, or if they did at all.
10 minutes, you want to wrap it up. What? You have 10 minutes.
Oh,
you
okay.
want to just wrap it up.
Okay. Okay. If there is any other questions, ask them now. Otherwise, it has been awesome to feel like I may be talking to people. Oh, does anybody have questions for Henry? Henry. Hi, buddy. So this is just what we're going to be leaving you with. It's just like
groaning
Yeah,
dog.
groaning, adorable dog. So thanks to everyone that came to visit my basement. Thanks to Erin for kind of feeling like you're a little bit like my producer on a radio show. And yeah, have a pleasant, amazing night. Is there any other last minute questions?
I think it's a lot of thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Happy Earth Day, everyone. I hope you got out there to enjoy it. And peace out. Be well. Love everyone. Bye.